Okay. All right. Hello, everybody. Before I begin, I just want to say a few words about tonight. If you do want to speak, please raise your hand. This includes building committee members. Um, I do want to say that there's been a lot going on behind the scenes, and so tonight is not intended to be a public hearing, and that's why I won't be allowing public comment. I'm not here to rehash the bidding results. We're here to figure out how to move this project forward. And there's been a lot of drama behind the scenes with people offering their opinion. But I can tell you, no one thought we would be in this position. And nobody wants to be in this position, but that's our reality right now. Um, and I also need to say that regardless of when we receive these estimates, we would still be in the same situation. We have promised to not ask the taxpayers for any additional funding, and there's no more money available from the town's budget. So instead of trying to, place blame on people, that which is it's out of everybody's control at this point. I would really like to work together with the building committee and design lab and Colliers and everybody else involved so that we can move this project forward and get a renovated library. And that's all I have to say. So I will hand it over to design lab.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Tina, and good evening, everyone, to the building committee members and others. Andrew's going to get his screen shared here, and we'll walk you through our presentation for the evening. Before we do that, I just want to take a moment and thank everybody for rescheduling the meeting back during the week of the 16th. I got hit with kind of a double whammy between the flu and pneumonia and was knocked out pretty hard that week. I know the timing, of course, wasn't ideal. It actually probably couldn't have been worse, but I really appreciate everybody rescheduling. We'll got an agenda here to share with you on the evening. Want to give a summary of where we are, the bid results, what where the bids came in. And then as Tina suggested, we really want to focus our attention, our energy to strategies on how to move this project forward. I will reiterate what Tina said. Nobody, including ourselves or any of our consultants, want to be in this position or expected to be in this position. It's incredibly challenging, and it's certainly not where we wanted to put the town of Stowe and all of the building committees members and all of the residents and taxpayers who have been working so hard to make this project happen. So we've got some strategies here that we want to share with you with the intent of putting our best foot forward in rebidding the project. We do have those plan options to share with you, as well as some landscape strategies and building system options, and then we'll leave plenty of time for discussion and next steps. So here we are at workshop 9 on the 8th. We were intending to have that workshop back on the 16th. Sorry, I've got a little daughter, Sophia, not right now. Sorry about that. We were intending to have a workshop before the holiday break, but that did have to get rescheduled. So appreciate everybody again for doing that. The other thing we want to mention here on this schedule is that we do have a very important meeting scheduled later this week or early next with the two cost estimators who have been involved on this project to really pick their brain on strategies on how to move forward and try to put everybody's collective expertise to move the project forward. It is our intention to work through a redesign process here in January, and then move forward with documentation and updating drawings with the hope to rebid the project in March. And the thought process there is the sooner we can get this back on the street and get it rebid, the better and the more favorable numbers we'll get. So that's our schedule in a nutshell. Building committee members, I think you all have seen this slide before, but members of the trustees and others who are on the call this evening have not seen this. You can see over the various phases of design where the different cost estimates fell. Most recently, our last cost estimate was back in this past summer, about halfway through our construction document phase, which landed at an $8.4 million number. We had sort of three buckets that we broke that money into in the green, sort of purple and blue bits, but that landed in CDs at around a $970 a square foot number. We'll talk more about that here in a moment. But as you all know, the low bids came in considerably higher. Hutter Construction was our low bidder at roughly $10.8 million, representing a cost per square foot of $1,200, which was not what any of us expected. I wanted to share this with you. We've been doing a lot of internal sort of research ourselves, reflecting on recent projects that have been bid, as well as past projects. And what you see on screen here, this is all design lab work. We do a lot of work in sort of the library world for public municipalities like Stowe, other public work as well. And then we also work in the private sector as well for higher education and other nonprofits. So the green bar is sort of privately funded projects. The orange line is publicly funded projects. And we're sharing this with you because, the past 5 years, particularly since the pandemic, has been really volatile and challenging, particularly in the construction industry. And you can see that there was sort of a gradual increase in costs in the late 2000 teens. This is about the past 10 years. And then leading from the pandemic, here on the next slide, you'll see that sort of average cost per square foot has really taken a sharp, steep turn and become steeper. And that's the reality in the market that we're working within. And as I said, it's been considerably volatile and hard to predict. 5 or 6 years ago, this project easily would have been a $600 or $700 a square foot project, maybe even less. And because of what we've seen over the past 3 or 4 years since the pandemic, costs have risen dramatically. But there was nothing to us that suggested that the cost would be as high as it came in. We have other projects that are similar. Not exact apples to apples, but renovations of existing buildings, some of them historic, and other buildings of sort of cultural and historic significance. And they've all been around $1,000 a square foot in the most recent estimates and bids that we've received. So we thought, obviously, we wouldn't have put an estimate forward that we weren't confident in, nor would our cost estimator. We were confident in our estimate of around $970 a square foot. That was within reason with the data and other projects that we've been seeing. So the $1,200 a square foot estimate that came in has caught us all off guard as well. You can click forward, please, Andrew. So again, this is a similar slide that building committee members have seen. Hutter Construction is the low bidder at the 10.8 number, but it's worth noting that the 3 other general bids that were received were obviously all higher than that, some of them exceeding 14 million. And then there's the filed sub-bid summary below. And it's worth noting, I think everyone knows this at this point, that one of the bigger busts that we've seen is related to the fire protection scope and the specialized sprinkler system that we have in the building as a result of the low water supply in town. Thanks, Andrew. Yeah, you can stay here. So we did pre-qualify 11 general contractors last fall. We got bids from 4. It's not a terrible turnout. It's not an awesome turnout. It's about average. We have spoken with some that were pre-qualified that did not bid in our due diligence over the past couple months, and we've learned that while this project typically would have been something that a lot of folks bid on. They were just simply too busy, too much of a backlog of work, not enough labor, not enough staff to support another project. So a number of bidders reluctantly passed. We had limited filed sub-bid coverage. And when we say filed sub-bid coverage, Andrew, actually, if you click back to the previous slide, those are all areas of scope that Mass General Law requires us to bid out independently. So masonry, miscellaneous metals, waterproofing, damp-proofing, roofing and flashing, sort of all of those categories that you see in the bottom bit of this slide. And we got decent coverage, but on some of the bigger areas of scope, we did not get great coverage, and we only had one or two bidders for some of the larger components. The sprinkler was one of them where we only got one bid. You can click forward, please. So the biggest, oh, sorry, one back. Thank you. Yep. Thank you. So the biggest factors on cost, I think it's a very selective bidding market out there. As I said, some folks generally would have bid on this project, but passed because they had a backlog of work. It's a small project in the grand scheme of things. It's only 9,000 square feet. It has a very limited economy of scale, even though it's a smaller building. Every trade still needs to touch it, and it's so small that there's not a lot of opportunity for economy of scale. I think the fact that it's a historic building and a renovation of a historic building, that inherently drives costs. And we've heard across the board, industry-wide, that there's a really limited labor pool. So even numbers where you would expect to get really competitive areas of or bids for drywall or painting or some of those other sort of trades, because there's a limited labor pool, all of those components of the project are also being driven by higher bids. I mentioned the specialized mist fire protection system that has driven the cost up. That bid came back over 3 times what we anticipated it by, and we only got one bid. And that suggests that it's a specialized system. Not a lot of people know how to install it, and they're throwing large numbers at that component of scope. The fact that the building's built into a hillside, we have retaining walls, we have to manage that sort of that grade with ramps and retaining walls and stairs. That's been a challenge and has contributed to the site costs. And while we don't have a lot of specialized millwork or finishes in the building, we did have some in the addition, and that was some feedback we got from the bidder that that's an opportunity to potentially evaluate to reduce scope. So we've got a lot of things on our minds that we've been reviewing with the building committee and with Tina and Denise and Matt, sort of our core team. We'll talk through these more in detail here in a little bit as we talk about some considering some alternate plans, but ultimately, we need to reduce scope, and to reduce scope, we very likely need to reduce square footage, and we need to reduce site features and design components. So all of these things are on the table in our minds. They're things that we think are easy things to sort of accept and move past. And there are others that we need to, think about more strategically and evaluate with the building committee, which is what our intention is to do. As I mentioned at the very beginning of the meeting, we are meeting with our cost estimators. There are 2 on the project later this week or early next, and we'll be evaluating all of these things with their expertise to figure out a path forward.
So we're going to go through a few plan options here. These are mostly kind of examples of what we've been working on and ideas, how to implement some of those ideas about how to actually significantly reduce the cost. And they're split into 2 options. We're not going to go through every aspect of every single one, but we're going to look at them kind of holistically. So here's where we left off. The plans that we submitted for bid. They kind of had a very wonderful wish list of items. It was a very nice plan, and so we took these and we tried to kind of instill the integrity of them once again, and walk away with something that may still function in a very similar way, but with less kind of silver linings on them. So as a baseline, we are basically removing all double height spaces, removing the ramp, and consolidating vertical circulation. With the reduced square footage, we're able to reduce the number of restrooms down to 3. And then we're moving some program around, moving the break room, reducing the size of the children's space as limited as we could, but it still does require significant reduction, and replacing one small meeting room. So here are 3 options. These are on a scale of basically size and square foot reductions, and it shows the effects that those reductions would have. So the left reduces the square footage by 1,100 square feet, and the right is a much more significant reduction of over 2,000 square feet. So there are sacrifices in all of these plans. Some of them combine the original quiet reading room with a community room. Some even move the whole entrance around and combine the workroom with Library of Things. And there's a lot of changes here. And we were experimenting with a lot of kind of out of the box ideas, but they all have sacrifices that they need to give. So with the baseline, they all have additional changes, whether it's moving the computers to mix with the circulation space, or combining the flex meeting room with the community living room. And then the third option that reduces it by over 2,000 square feet has a significant amount of those reductions or changes. So we'd go from roughly 9,500 square feet to as much as 7,400 square feet, which is a pretty significant reduction.
I just want to reiterate here, until we get the insights from our cost estimators, we don't know which avenue we need to pursue. So we're exploring these options. We're kind of weighing their pros and cons and their impact on program spaces. But we're not certain until we get that meeting which direction we'll need to go. I think it's safe to assume it'll likely need to be option 2 or maybe even option 3. But our intention is to come back at our next building committee meeting with more concrete feedback.
And a key part of these 3 options that we just saw, they all maintain a sprinkler system in some way, whether it's the mist system or looking at a cistern option, which may garner more interest in the construction market. But we have been looking at another option that would not need a sprinkler system. It does sacrifice some of the key requests that we heard very early on and very loudly about this project, but we're calling this the code separated option. It is technically building a second building on the site that would then be connected with walkways. It would be a 2-story walkway. It would, by code, you need sprinklers in any building over 5,000 square feet. Both of these buildings would be slightly less than 5,000 square feet. We're still exploring whether this is even a possibility, but it's so far the only option that we can find that does not require a sprinkler system. There are, of course, baseline sacrifices with this one as well, or changes. And there are additional changes on top of those as well, still combining some program, still reducing the size of the children's spaces, reducing storage sizes, things like that.
So alongside any interior sort of programmatic change and changes in layout to the plans, we also need to reevaluate the exterior character of the building. Inherently, if the building reduces in footprint, the amount of exterior cladding will be reduced alongside it. We do, fundamentally think that the sort of exterior character approach that we landed on for the primary elevation of stone and brick is still the right approach. However, we think there's opportunity to simplify that. It's detailing. We think we can eliminate dormers that were being considered. We can reevaluate the roof form to find more economy. And anything other than the primary facade, especially once we simplify the footprint and the volume, we'll look to clad like we did in the previous scheme, but there would be more of it, of a more economical cementitious siding type cladding. Can move forward, please. Alongside this, we also need to reevaluate all of the landscape decisions and strategies that were made. So with the building footprint likely getting smaller, that can lead to adjustments in the landscape strategy. We think we can simplify what was a sloped walkway to the historic entrance and change that to a ramp, which is sort of a technical change, but it just makes it a little bit of a steeper slope. It's still ADA accessible, but it can simplify the amount of concrete work and retaining wall and sort of switchbacks that we need. We also think we should consider removing parking along Crescent and relying on the parking on Common Road. We can narrow the historic entry staircase up a little bit. It's 10 feet wide now. We think we can get it reduced comfortably down to less than 8 and still be impactful. And then around the addition, we think we can limit and reduce planting and hardscape, potentially retain more of the existing trees because the footprint is smaller. So there are all sorts of things that we think we can evaluate from a landscape perspective as well. And then there's other components. We've obviously been talking about architecture and program and landscape just now. There are other building system components that we can evaluate and are actively evaluating with our consultant team. The first two on the mechanical, electrical, plumbing note there, use gas-fired equipment instead of electrical and opting out of the stretch code. We know those aren't options. Those are things that the town have elected to pursue, but we are noting them primarily because our MEP consultants have just advised us that those are adding to the costs of the building systems. There's other modest things that we can do with the layouts of restrooms to make them more consolidated and reduce piping that we're evaluating. On the civil side of things, with changes of landscape and reducing hardscape comes, it goes hand in hand with reducing stormwater systems. So that's something that would impact both the landscape, what you see, but also what is happening underground that you don't see. And there's some structural components that we're evaluating as well to reduce and simplify the structural frame of the addition. And then all the landscape stuff you see here, I just described on the previous slide. So that's really the sort of summary of our presentation this evening. Just wanted to show the schedule again, because we've are meeting with our cost estimators, which will be a critical component of our process that's happening later this week or next. And then we're back with the building committee the week of January 22nd. And in that meeting, we hope to come, or we intend to come with clear recommendations on how to proceed, so we can get feedback and have a discussion, and then hopefully advance into redocumentation in February, and then rebidding in March or April. So with that, I'll hand it over to you, Tina.
Yes.
Happy to facilitate a conversation and answer any questions.
Thank you. Do any building committee members want to make a comment or have a question? I saw Aisha's hand first, so I'm going to go there.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks everyone. Thank you for bringing these new options to us, and then I hope you're feeling a lot better. That is a lot to deal with right before the holidays.
Thank you. I am.
One question for you is, I know there, or maybe for Colliers, I know there were some benefits to going with the pre-qualified bidders only for the last round of bidding. Do you have any reason to believe that there might be a benefit to open that pool up for the second round and consider contractors who did not go through the pre-qualification process?
Matt, do you want to take this one, or would you like me to?
I can if you'd like. So we had pre-qualified the general contractors only. And so all of the trade work that Ben mentioned in his presentation was open to all DCAM certified trade contractors who are eligible to do public work. So that's essentially more than half of the value of the project was an open competition at that point. And a big component of the general bid numbers was driven by that bidder pool that was open to all eligible bidders in those categories. The pre-qualification that we did is valid for 120 days. And so depending on the timing, if we are able to get this out for bid on the schedule, we may not actually need to pre-qualify in order to do that again. I'll have to sort of confirm that, but previously we had just pre-qualified the general contractors as a sort of a QA/QC measure for the project. I think we'll want to discuss with Denise, Tina, and the committee whether we want to go that direction again. I do not see personally, I don't see a huge benefit to doing that, but that's my own personal opinion. I want to. That's not my decision to make either.
Thank you. That's helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Andrew.
You're muted, Andrew.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you
go.
Yep.
Thanks for the presentation. Very thorough and detailed. And thanks for the options. I've got a couple questions about process. One is related to bidding. All the GCs who bid before, have they seen all the bids now? Is that public information?
It is, yes.
Okay. But they haven't seen anything about budget, so.
Well, it was advertised, Andrew, at an $8.4 million project.
Okay.
Yeah,
And they still,
that's,
okay.
yes.
Yep.
Yep, and they all have access to one another's bids.
Okay. Great. In terms of rebidding it, you had a couple options there with different sizes, and some of them were just a slightly smaller version of the same one. Had you considered doing either an add alternate version or a deduct alternate version so that you can get bids on two versions, or is that overcomplicating things? And
that's a very good question, and it's not necessarily something we've considered, but that's not to say we shouldn't. I think we've been focused on just exploring options together internally and with the building committee, but I think that's a good thought. We should think about that once we get some more information.
okay. questions about the kind of some of the options you showed. When you talked about the synthetic slate, which I assume would be kind of like a rubber slate or something. Is that for the historic and addition, that you'd have one slate type for both buildings? Or
I
would it
think,
be actual slate on the original?
yeah, the latter, because the original building, the historic building, we're only doing a slate replacement in some
Yep.
localized areas where
Okay.
it's needed. So we'd want to match with exact, actual slate on the existing
Yeah.
building. And if we still have a sort of sloped roof form on the addition, we'd consider a synthetic slate.
Yeah, so I kind of wonder, like, if there are other options in there, like if you're gonna not match it, you just go a little further in a different direction.
Yeah, quite
Mm.
possibly. And maybe it needs to go to metal and yep,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And then finally, the option that you showed with the separated buildings, I think is intriguing. So I'd be curious to see what code consultants say about that. In another way, while it separates the program a little bit, it also gives a little bit of difference between the buildings, and so they could withstand a little bit more variation on the second building. But specific question about that, you showed kind of a bridge going across there. Is that because of the distance that needs to be between the buildings?
Yes,
Yeah.
Andrew, you can click back to that. I think it's a relatively new idea that has popped up, Andrew, as a potential strategy to eliminate the sprinkler altogether. And there's a lot of questions that come along with it. But it's something, we want to put all options on the table here to come up with a path forward.
I mean, I appreciate the creativity of it, and I think it's interesting. And we're looking at the program, we're putting a lot of burden on that shared circulation between them already. But if this could allow them, by saving $750,000 off of sprinklers, to do a bigger building that's a little more efficient, I think it's interesting to pursue.
Agreed. Yep. That's why it's on the table. Absolutely.
So those are all my questions. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Kat, you're next.
Thanks so much. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. Yeah, sorry. I think I have probably what Ben had before the break. So sorry if I sound a little muffled. I wanted to just echo Andrew's comments that, yeah, this is an interesting idea, separating the buildings for that cost savings in terms of the fire suppression. And I do believe that the Concord Library has kind of something similar to this going on. If you go into downtown Concord, for any of the building committee members or trustees who are interested, the Concord Library had to do something like this to incorporate some land in the building that they had. So it's not unusual in library settings to have some setups like this. So definitely please pursue it, especially if it's a cost savings and helping us keep square footage and programming. I think that's a great idea. One question I had was if there was any updates on the fire suppressant. Like, I know that maybe Denise had mentioned potentially going to see if we could get a variance or anything around the sprinkler systems. Was that a path forward or not?
It's seeming less and less likely, Kat, that's going to be a viable path forward.
Okay.
We are currently proceeding with all of these ideas in that we would, in any other option other than this one, which doesn't need a sprinkler system, but the other ones, that it would have to have a sprinkler system based on some recent conversations we've had with the authorities having jurisdiction.
Gotcha. Okay. And then my second question was in terms of the cost estimators, since it was like so far off last time, if whether or not they're like, like how much value there is in that sort of thing, if there was any way to, instead of using, a 2 cost estimator situation, like go to a contractor, like, is that something that can be done where instead of, going to someone that just professionally crunches numbers, but like someone that's actually the type of person that would bid on this type of job, like as a, is there any way to do that or any possibility to get that sort of information to help us make these decisions, since the cost estimators didn't seem to be super helpful last time?
It's a very fair question. I'll take, I guess, maybe the cost estimator side of it, and then Matt, you can speak to the sort of contractor input. One thing that we're doing, Kat, moving forward, you may remember at the end of design development, we had a third party cost estimator look at the project. They estimated it alongside our cost estimator, and they put the two numbers side by side, and then we reconciled it. So rather than, but then they hadn't looked at the project since design development, that second cost estimator. So in order to get as many minds around the project that we can that are familiar with it, we're looking to bring that group back into our process with our cost estimator and having a meeting of the minds all together around the table, and try to sort out a best path forward. So we're trying to get more expertise on the project than we had during our last estimate. So that's a partial answer to your question. And then Matt, on the contractor side, I'm not sure if there's a path there that we could consider or not.
Mhm. Yeah, the idea with just to add one more thing to Ben's point about the cost estimators, the idea is to gather multiple data points so we can have a little bit more certainty around the number that comes out of that process. Is the point of getting another estimator involved, as was done in the lead up in the design development phase. As far as getting numbers from contractors, unfortunately, on a public project, the process for that is bidding, is how we get numbers from contractors. I mean, the professional estimators that we use do gather their information based on actual bid results on other projects, around the Commonwealth. So they're working with up-to-date numbers based on actual bid results. It would seem to be the most accurate information that we are able to get, other than bidding the project directly. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. It's, obviously it's frustrating. It's different than when you're a homeowner, you just go to the contractor and say how much.
I know.
So
Yeah,
it's
we
hard
do need
for-
to. Sorry,
yeah,
go ahead.
and it's hard to justify to taxpayers when we're like, we
Mhm.
promised it's not going to be any,
Yeah.
this is what it's going to be. We've checked our numbers twice down and double checked. So I just wanted to confirm that we're doing all that we can to make sure that we have, more accurate, before we go out to bid. But okay, thank you guys for updating me on that.
Yeah, the process for getting that information is Chapter 149, public procurement.
Awesome, thank you.
And I just want to add a few comments to Kat's questions. So one of the reasons why, now this is just my opinion based on conversations that have happened in the last month regarding the fire suppression. The heavy rains that we had in December actually leaked into the electrical system in the library and caused a fire in the electrical panel. I think that, coupled with the fact that there could be a potential alternative for the two buildings, which adds additional fire protection, is why the professionals here that are weighing in on that don't want to just waive the fire suppression option. I think the electrical panel issue caused a lot of folks some concern because the building filled up with smoke. We have no water in the center of town, as you all know, and had that been an actual fire to burn, I mean, we could have lost the building. So I think those things happening are making, the fire chief specifically think about the fact that we really need some additional protection in this building, whether it be a suppression system or the ability to have separate buildings that would have fire doors and whatnot, to add a level that we don't currently have today. And then the other question on the cost estimators, just so everyone's aware, we did speak with the lowest bidder after the bids came in to get an understanding of why they bid what they did. Now, they couldn't go through everything with us. Again, as Matt articulated, it is Chapter 149, and they couldn't go through every item, but that's where we got a lot of the feedback on what the specific cost drivers were. So we spoke specifically to a contractor to understand their bid better as it relates to the specifications we put forward. And I just think that's important for folks to know that.
Yeah, thank you very much, Denise.
Okay, thank you. Next is Richard. Just, you need to unmute yourself, Richard.
Uh,
There you go.
better?
Yep.
Yeah, I want to go back to Andrew Grove's question, because at the end, I couldn't quite hear it, but it sounded like he was asking about two other options. And I didn't hear it. It was a smidge garbled, and I was wondering if you could repeat that, because I didn't get what he was. I also want to say, I too like the idea of the separate buildings, especially if the one on the left looks like it would be the least drastic space reduction. 4.1.
This, Richard, was the option that I was asking about. Because if you look at the reduction in square footage, it's between 900 and 1600 versus the 2000 square foot reduction. But if this could eliminate the fire protection system, which is a whole nother issue, then that would take out the biggest filed sub-bid number and get us much closer to where we need to be.
Okay, thank you. I didn't know. I thought maybe it was something else. Thank you.
No, there's this option. Yeah.
Thank you. Morgan.
I have a couple of questions. I guess the first one, just off of that last comment, when you were presenting this, Ben, you said that this two building option sort of goes against what the community wanted. Is that just the fact that we wanted to have one building versus two buildings so that it doesn't feel like an addition?
In
Or was there
simplest
something
terms,
more specific?
no, in simplest terms, yes, that was it.
Okay.
I think some of the early feedback we got in the very early days of the sort of programming and community input stage was that the current setup of the library feels like two separate buildings, like it's the 70s edition and the historic building. And one of the primary goals was to create a unified experience, holistically, which we tried to do through the previous design. And this is obviously a big departure from that.
Right.
But that's not to say it's not something that we should reevaluate and really seriously consider, especially hearing some of the, building committee members speak positively, at least initially, towards this. I think it's something we need to evaluate further.
Okay, thanks. So I do have a couple of questions. I was taking notes as we were going through. First question, reduction in the double height spaces. What does that mean for, what will the height be? Because I know that a not very tall ceiling is a big concern in the current building. So if we're reducing the double height spaces, what does that mean?
So you may remember the larger sort of double height space. And when we say double height, we mean 2 stories tall. Yep. We had imagined, Andrew, if you click back one more, in that seating area of what we were considering the lobby or kind of entry lounge, we were considering that being 2 stories high, which carved out some space within that children's area. So I think we would still have around 9-foot ceilings if we don't have that, maybe even a little better, because we're still proposing that the addition be built lower than the lower level of the existing building. Because the floor to ceiling in the existing building in that basement is so low that we want more relief. That would be one of the spaces that we would eliminate. And then there was a little pocket of space near that elevator there that was supposed to create a little bit of a view out to the exterior and a double height moment at the bottom of the ramp in the previous design. But those obviously take up space and square footage. And if we can reallocate those to program, that's what we're proposing to do.
Okay, great. Thank you. Next question. We're thinking that perhaps rebidding will result in lower numbers based on the time of year and everything. So is the plan that we're going to both reduce drastically as well as rebid, which I guess if I'm thinking optimistically, could that result in a situation where we actually could add some things back in if the price comes in lower, or we think that's just not going to happen?
I like the glass have full outlook. I think we can be, you know, as Andrew was suggesting it earlier, there's what we refer to as ad alternates, where we can bid components of the project. So if that does happen, then we can say, yes, we'd like to take this ad alternate, whatever that may be, because we have the funding available to do it. The reality is we have to rebid. We can't accept the bid as it is.
Right.
We can't accept it and then go into a redesign process with that general contractor. The mass bid law doesn't allow us to do that. So we have to rebid it. And we want to rebid it prior to, you know, everybody ramping up in the springtime and summertime to start new projects. So we're hoping that we can get rebid, you know, at the tail end of the winter, ideally as soon as possible, really.
Okay, great. Next question. I'm wondering what, and this might be a difficult question to answer in like specifically, but this continued redesign process and the time that it's taking and the work that you all are doing, how is that affecting our budget? Because that has to be unplanned costs that we were, again, no one was anticipating. So, and to be clear, I'm not in any way suggesting this in like a blame fashion. It's just, how does this impact it?
Yeah, I understand. That's a fair question. I mean, to this point, we've been operating in good faith, trying to put our best foot forward to come up with a solution for the town of Stowe. You know, we'll evaluate that and put a proposal together that we think is fair and reasonable and appropriate. And not that we're often in this situation, but you know, situations similar to this do arise. If we have to do it at cost or at discount, you know, we'll do that. That's not something we're not prepared to do. And it just to add to that, that's why we want to get through this as efficiently as possible, for not just for our time, but for all of you who are volunteering and donating time. I mean, we got to get this thing to a point where we can build it. So that's why we're trying to get through this redesign effort as quickly as possible.
Okay, thank you. And then my last question, which might better be served as a comment to the building committee, but I understand that we have to do this, and I'm game, and I appreciate all of these options, and are, you know, we'll figure it out. But I think we need to be prepared to explain to the town how we are going to get less space with a new library that costs more than we intended it to be than what we currently have, because that is like one of the biggest questions that we kept getting asked by the community is, what's the difference in square footage? Which is, you know, as we know, a silly question on its own, given the way that space is used. But I think that, like, in the background, the building committee needs to come up with some way of doing our best to explain this to the community, because I think it's going to not be taken well. Never mind not reaching the stretch goals and the things that we have prioritized as a community and in wanting in this building. So just food for thought for my fellow community members, that we might want to spend some time thinking about outreach. But thank you very much.
Hey, thank you. Lisa, you're next.
Thanks, Tina. I just wanted to voice my appreciation also for the work that's gone into this. It's everybody's very frustrated, and I think that just let's keep going forward is the right approach. I love the idea of the two separate buildings, and just wanted to voice that perspective. And was wondering if you could just say a little bit more when you were talking about the exterior landscape relative to restoring the original entrance, that you would be making the stairs wider. What else would change about that from what you know right now? I understand nothing is completed.
Actually, Andrew, maybe click back to the current scheme. So sorry, these aren't rendered and illustrated similarly. So, but we're a lot of sausage making going on here. But we actually proposed, Lisa, narrowing the stairs. Right now, I think we've got them at 10 feet. And we're proposing to narrow those to 7.5, 8 feet, just to get a little bit of concrete work and stonework out of there. And then the zigzag, what was a sloped walkway on the left there, that was a gradual sloped walkway, and we're proposing to make that a ramp, which is just a little bit steeper, still ADA accessible, but it reduces the amount of concrete work again.
Okay, so the walkway to the entrance is being narrowed, and then it looks like that apron right at the doorway is the original size roughly of the, you know, within the form of the arch?
Yeah, I think that, yeah, that's about right. Yep. So there's a bit of a landing area there. Sorry,
Okay,
I'm
great.
being taken over here. One moment. Andrew and Audrey, can you take
Yeah.
over for a sec? Thanks.
And there are additional cuts as well that are made here. We with our landscape architect, we're also looking at what's really necessary. We are maintaining the walls that were retaining earth, but what wasn't retaining earth in this old plan, we're removing and potentially replacing with something that's still somewhat of a visual barrier, but like planting or shrubs or something like that. Not shown in this plan, but that's what we've discussed. So you can actually see it here, blocking these pavers with bushes or a new hedge. So and then that kind of has a compounding effect as well, which because we would need less hardscape means less civil work because we wouldn't have to bring water to the sewage. It would all just infiltrate into the ground. So those are the kind of the overall ideas that we're considering with landscape, and this plan is how we're right now starting to implement it.
One last question that you may not know the answer to is, or maybe Denise knows, is if the design is significantly altered from what was originally thought, what's the process within the town for vetting the idea or the design?
I can start this, Denise, if you'd like. We have talked about this a little bit, and that's actually a reason why some of our plans look the way they do. If we can maintain, I believe this is correct, if we can maintain within the existing footing of the proposed building, then we do not need to go back to zoning. So it's easier to see here, obviously. But if we do have a more drastic footprint change that dramatically leaves the footprint, we may need to report back.
So yes and no. I think either way, we will need to go back to zoning just to give them an update of the changes. As you'll recall from that meeting, they weighed in quite a bit on parking, the entranceway, the historic entrance. So if we're making changes to those, I've spoken with the planning department, and they think as a courtesy, we should be letting the ZBA know that those changes are made. If we are outside of the variance, we may have to ask for another variance. So that's the goal, is to not need to amend the variance request, but to stay in the footprint that they have approved. But either way, if we start making changes, we will have to at least let them know.
Okay, do any other building committee members have any comments or questions right now? I don't see any. I do want to ask, I see Barbie has her hand up, and because the trustees are custodians of this building, I do want to hear her comment or questions. So go ahead, Barbie.
Thank you. And I'll start out by asking you to forgive me for being fairly ignorant about some of these issues that all of you have been working with for several months. So, but I still have the questions. I don't understand why Design Lab in reworking this would be charging unless it's written into the contract somehow that if it comes in differently and impossibly different from what the original agreement was, why would you be charging us to redo it? I just need a legal explanation.
Ben, we're not hearing you. You're not muted, but we're not hearing you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, weird. Sorry. Sorry about that. we're not suggesting that we are going to be charging. I mean, it is not clear language in our contract one way or the other. We're as disheartened about the bid results as any of you. I'll just be very clear about that. We've worked very diligently and hard on this process for over 2 years now. It is not a position that we want to be in or want to put any of you in. We need to evaluate how long this effort's going to take. It is not black and white in our contract that we are or are not, allowed to be compensated. If we can get through this efficiently, we may not request to be compensated. If it takes months and months and months, then we probably would. And we haven't had that level of conversation yet because our focus is on trying to get the project to move forward.
Thank you. Another question, Aisha brought up a question about the non-pre-qualified estimators. I didn't get the answer. Could you just summarize the answer for me?
Sure, I can. Ben, if you were trying to talk, you were muted there. So I think the question was about bidders in the there are a number of trades and general contractors in which scopes above a certain contract value should be pre-qualified. And so based on the contract value of the estimated construction cost, we didn't have to do that, but we chose to do that for the general contractors only as just a QA/QC measure to vet the general contractors who would be overseeing the work. So we had pre-qualified just the general contractors. And I think that the question was about the wider pool of individual sub-trade contractors that were not pre-qualified. They are in good standing with DCAM and are certified to be doing public work. But we took an extra step for the general contractors who would be in charge of the entire construction project. And so we had 10 pre-qualified contractors, of which, as Ben mentioned, 4 of them chose to bid the project.
And you intend
your question? I'm sorry.
And so you intend to continue if you do send out bids again that only work with pre-qualified?
Depending on the timing, the contractors that we pre-qualified may still be pre-qualified, depending on if we're able to get to a point and rebid the project within the time frame. But not certain, and we'll discuss that further with Denise, Tina, and the building committee as needed.
Two more questions. Can the trustees get copies of today's slides, please? That would be very useful for us.
They'll all be on the website, Barbie, like all the slides of every meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, once I get them from Ben, they'll go on the website with everything else.
Oh, excellent, thank you. Okay, let me just write that down. And then the final one is, you've given some options, and I know you've been working hard, and I do appreciate that. Because of there's a lot of history with this library trying to get updated. And in some of these original bids, there was the option of just bringing the building up to code. Could you submit an option that would be simply bringing the building up to code? I think that as a trustee, we need to really look at this again. I'm not trying to cause problems, but this is a lot of money for the town. And it may make sense to defer once again if we're losing significant square footage at a higher cost. It may be, I would just like to look at that option if it's possible.
So I'm just going to comment here, Barbie. The building committee discussed this in the beginning, way back, 2+
Yes.
years ago. And not unlike the high school project, we decided that that was not an approach we wanted to take. That we felt that having, even if it's the same or slightly smaller square footage versus usable square footage makes a huge difference. And I think before the folks at Design Lab spend any time or effort on that, that would be something that the building committee would have to have a serious discussion about and see if that's a way we want to proceed.
I hear you. But I think that was then when the committee decided not to go that route. I'm saying because of such drastic changes that we perhaps should be able to discuss that option again.
Right. The building committee will discuss that option
Yeah.
again if that's something we choose to move forward with.
That's what I would think would be useful. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbie. Kat.
Sorry, one more follow-up just based on some of the comments. In terms of the square footage, like what Morgan was saying, if we do that, like that appendage kind of separate building, is that a big loss in square footage or not? Okay, reduces, okay, by about 1,000 square feet. And that you guys just did based on the variance, like and I'm assuming when you say variance, you mean you had to go to zoning board of appeals because you were close to the property line. So there's a certain distance that you can't get any closer to. Am I understanding that correctly?
Correct.
Okay,
Correct.
so the size of that building is based on that. So if you brought it like more forward or you adjusted the angle slightly, the size of that rectangle or square could change.
I would say that nothing in these plans are set in stone. Even the square footages are based on program requests, and overall gut check feelings, if you will. I mean, they are still significant reductions in square footage, but we also haven't had the ability to explore these options nearly in depth as we have the previous design. So there would be a lot to review with these. So I just want to make that really clear. Right now, these are somewhat proof of concepts that we still need to look into a lot. We haven't found exactly a cutoff that says we can't do it, but there is a lot that would need to go into researching these options.
Okay, awesome. But assuming that you could still implement the same type of concepts from what you've already said, where it's like a more simplified roof line and more simplified building materials and things like that, we could assume that we'll see some similar cost savings in this type of a design.
That's what we're hoping for.
Okay.
Yes, but there is other unknowns, I would say, as well. So where there's reductions in square footage, we would still reduce materials, we would reduce the exterior design, we would reduce the windows, the curtain wall, so on and so forth. But we would need a more thorough analysis.
Okay, and the biggest, like it has to be under 5,000 square feet on like combined top and bottom floor. Is that also correct?
Exactly. Yeah,
okay.
Both buildings will have to be under 5,000 square feet.
Awesome.
Total gross, which means to the exterior of the wall.
Awesome. Thank you, Andrew, for explaining all that to me.
Thanks, Kat. Aisha.
So this is recognizing that if this 2 building option is even an option and all of the places where things are could still change. It looks like the community room moved over to the historic building in both of these options, and there are no restrooms in there, and it doesn't look like there's a way to go up or down there. So just wanted to confirm that doing that would mean after hours programming wouldn't have access to restrooms if they're in the other building. And there would be no way to go up or down within the building. Is that right?
In these plans, but again, you know, that's something that we would have to look into and have to seriously consider how that would operate. And so as we've been looking at these 5 plans, we haven't been able to kind of consider every single request that we were looking at before.
Of course. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else before we move on? Okay. Thank you very much, everybody. I believe the next thing is our invoices. So review paid invoices and approve any that have come in.
I sent out the spreadsheet to the committee members this morning. There's nothing that needs to be reviewed because the committee previously voted to allow me to put forward anything under 25,000. But here's where we stand as of today. I got a Collier's invoice this morning. So you'll see the ones with an X are the ones the building committee has actually voted on. Then there's the ones that we reviewed at our last meeting. The list is on our website under the building committee project page. But that's where we stand with invoices since our last meeting. But there's nothing new that needs to be approved.
Okay. Great, thank you.
Welcome.
There are minutes that we need to approve, though.
I'll make a motion that we approve the September 13th Library Building Committee 2.0 and Exterior Design Committee minutes.
Do I have a second?
Someone has to raise their virtual hand so I can.
Anyone?
There are a couple hands raised.
Are there?
Morgan,
I don't
yeah.
see, sorry.
They're raising their actual hand.
Okay. Well, now you're confusing me. Okay. So I have a second, correct, Richard?
Yes.
Okay. Any other discussion? All in favor?
So
Do
how
I-
do you want to do, wait, how do you want to do
Yes.
this?
So can you raise your hand,
Your virtual hand?
your actual hand or your virtual hand, so I can see Frank, Sunny, Denise, Lisa, Aisha, Andrew.
You have Morgan, Melissa, Sunny
Yes,
have raised their virtual hands.
yes. Okay. So that is unanimous.
I don't think it's quite unanimous.
Why not?
I don't
Put it
think everyone voted.
No,
Oh no, maybe Marcy's not on anymore.
I don't see
Okay,
her.
so then yes, it probably is unanimous, sorry.
Okay, that's okay. I can't see everything. Yeah.
And so that's
Okay.
unanimous.
Yes,
I make a motion that we approve the Library Building 2.0 only committee meeting minutes from November 27th, 2023.
do I have a second? That was Lisa, I saw that. Okay. All in favor, raise your hand or virtual hand. I see Frank. Oh no, this was exterior, sorry, or just building committee?
Just building committee.
Building, okay, Frank, Sunny, Kat, Aisha, Denise, Tina, Lisa. Who did I miss? I think that's it. Marcy's not on anymore.
Nope.
Okay. That's all in favor then. Is that it? Do you have anything else? No. Do I have a motion?
So before we go, can I ask the folks at Design Lab? You mentioned a meeting the week of January 22nd, but that's not something that we've spoken about previously. While we have building committee members here, is that the week you're targeting?
Yeah, that's 2 weeks from today, Denise. And the hope was to schedule something, yeah, before the end of January. So if there's another date that is favorable, that's fine on our end. But we would like to get something something on the books.
Okay. Okay. So I'll leave that to, I have interview nights every night that week, so I can't participate, but Tina can coordinate with the building committee members for that week.
Okay.
Great, thank you.
Okay, motion to adjourn at 7:41.
Okay. Lisa seconded. Everybody in favor? Thank you, everybody.
Thanks
Thank
all.
you.
Yep.
Night.
Thank you all.
That's all.
Have a good night.